Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another really live Friday afternoon edition of Green Rush Live, the Business of Cannabis talk show. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and sometimes host of Green Rush Live. And this show is going to be dedicated to the females in the cannabis industry. Yes, women in cannabis. And we have a great panel lineup for you for the next few hours. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe, not just to this show, but all the Pro Cannabis Media content that is out there and available to you, the viewer at home, the person that we want to continue to provide great content and information to. Joining me as my guest host for the next few hours is a friend, somebody I've known now for a number of years. Her name is Christina Di Giovanni. She is the editor, the founder, and the all-around woman in the cannabis space from Emerald Media and Emerald Magazine. Hello, Christina.
Hello, Jimmy. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's a pleasure to see you again, too, as well. And this was an interesting week. Not only were there a ton of news items going on this week, but you also were involved with an event in New York City that was similar in theme, women in cannabis. Can you kind of recap what Tuesday night was all about and who was there and how did it go?
Absolutely. It was a fantastic turnout, especially for a Tuesday in the rain. We were all pleasantly surprised, but we were there collectively to celebrate women in cannabis, women products. There was infused food there. We were at Essex Restaurant on the Lower East Side. We had a full house. Jenny RG, who does Jenny's Baked at Home, she had her board of directors there for her brand, all wonderful women. We had a panel discussion. And, you know, it was really just to celebrate the launch of her board, celebrate women in cannabis, and to come together during the holidays. And, you know, if anyone out there is thinking about maybe joining a board, I know that she is actively looking for board members. So if anyone out there wants to get involved, we'd love to have you be a part of our team.
And that's Jenny, right? Jenny?
Yeah, absolutely. You could contact me at the Emerald, or you could contact Jenny at Jenny's Baked at Home, and you know, we'll get you to the right place.
Now, was there a friend of Pro Cannabis Media there besides Jenny by any chance named Christopher?
Yes, actually, Christopher was there.
We miss him. We do miss him. He's the host of the American Cannabis Report on Pro Cannabis Media, and now has moved from California to upstate New York to work with Jenny, which I think is a great thing.
I think it is lovely.
Who else was there in the crowd? Because I know a few other women in cannabis in the New York area that are pretty active in this.
Sure. We had, you know, some of our sponsors are women-founded. Etain Wellness, for example. They are a medical cannabis dispensary here in New York. You know, I mean, there's so many great brands. We had a joint rolling station there. I mean, there's just so much innovation, so much creativity going on. There was it felt like over 100 people were there. So it was a very fun night.
And New York City right now is kind of an open market for the cannabis community because the regulations are still pretty gray. Nothing's really set in stone, and there are ways to just walk around the streets of New York and actually find cannabis for sale, for gifting, for infusion, for whatever floats your boat, isn't it?
There are a few illegal dispensaries, a noticeable amount here in New York, and I'm based in Brooklyn, but you could see them in Queens or Manhattan. And, you know, for the most part, they should have been sent to cease and desist, I think. And now that New York has granted the first 36 retail licenses, you know, maybe there might be more enforcement. I don't know. Yes, but they are here. They're in Central Park. You know, I don't want to say everyone's smoking cannabis, but it sure smells like cannabis is in the air this year. So even Mayor Adams says, you know, the only thing I smell is weed. So,
you know, I do like his attitude and how he's really kind of accepted the community and given support to the community by not really enforcing the laws or the rules or waiting for the right time. And I do know at one point they actually had to tow food trucks out of Times Square, and they find all those food trucks that were actually infusing their food with cannabis. But the question I have is, do these people who are actually running these stores and running these truck stops, they are actually looking at the fines that they might be facing and balancing that with what they're actually making off the sale of their products? And I'm not quite sure there's enough incentive there for them to stop.
Well, that is a much bigger discussion, Jimmy.
I mean, Christina, do you know any of these people that are out there selling openly?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know them personally. Like,
Yeah.
they're, I don't know. I don't have any friends that are posted up, but I can tell you that I live in a very, bustling neighborhood in Brooklyn, and on one street there's, I think, 4 mobile dispensaries on one block, and it's like an old ambulance, like 2 minivans, and I think a bus, and it's on one street. So the neighborhood's saturated, the market's saturated. There's too much competition. I don't know. I mean,
are people upset? I guess, and then are there NIMBYs out there, not in my backyard, people who are upset about it?
Sorry, the connection's kind of breaking out a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Well, you did break out, which is cool. Is there any pushback from neighborhood groups, from different neighbors who maybe are not the most welcoming to the cannabis scene? And we call them NIMBYs, not in my backyard.
I don't mingle with people that have complained necessarily. It's hard because you want to honor the legacy market, but then some people are saying that these pop-up dispensaries are not legacy. So it's really hard to kind of navigate that. I want everyone who was involved in cannabis to continue to succeed in cannabis, post legalization. I've been in it with the media company for, it's going to be 11 years come January. And, so I've seen the evolution of this industry from California, from Humboldt County, from the Emerald Triangle, all the way out to New York. I lived in New York for going on 4 years now. So yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. The thing is, though, if you operate, in a legal dispensary, the unfortunate fact is that you're not filing your taxes appropriately. Like, you're not you're not setting yourself up for the long run, for retirement, for the day that you can kick your feet up. But if you take the time to go out and get legalized and get permitted, then you could put money on the books, and you could, file your taxes, and then you can have Social Security if that's going to exist down the road. But I mean, it's setting yourself up for success down the road. And so I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. The economy's hard, inflation. I mean, and everyone loves to have money in their pocket at the end of the day. I heard, a rumor that maybe they make like $5,000 a day if they're lucky. But, I mean, if you have a real dispensary, if you're able to go through that process, and you'd be making more than $5,000 a day. So it's good to go the right road, is what I'm basically rambling on about.
And I'm saying the same thing. I get it. And especially if you're spending the time hiring the attorneys, filling out the forms, putting up your own money or investor money into getting licensing. This has happened, I'm pretty sure, at every municipality in every state that votes it in. And then there's always that gray time that between the regulations starting, the actual dispensaries, licensed dispensaries opening up officially, versus the legacy market, this gray area that is part of this industry when you start, because they just figure, hey, whatever fines I get, because we know law enforcement doesn't want to bust these people because the district attorney's office don't want to prosecute them. So it's really a wild, wild west situation out there, isn't it, in this interim period?
It does seem a little wild, wild west. I'll say that. I used to use that term when I was living up in Humboldt County, because that felt like the wild, wild west. But
that really was the wild, wild west. Okay. I mean, you were in the West and it was wild, and you have a lot of experience there. Can you enlighten some of the audience, perhaps, that don't know you that well, about what your background is, what you were up to in Humboldt County when that, and how you ended up back into New York? Because I think you did start your life in New Jersey. Am I right?
No, I started my life in Southern California.
Oh,
In
sorry.
Yeah, no, in San Diego. And then I moved to Austin, Texas when I was young.
Okay.
And then I got busted smoking weed when I was a kid. And well, I say kid, like 14. And then I went to boarding school after that in New Jersey.
I knew there
So
was a New Jersey connection there. I knew that.
yeah,
Okay.
went to boarding school in New Jersey and then went to college at Humboldt State University and consumed a lot of cannabis and got really immersed in the culture up there. I started trimming, as a lot of people have, and would go up to the mountain and would make, lots of money and trim, and everything was good. And eventually, grew my own cannabis. But somewhere in the middle, my boyfriend at the time and I, he got caught on an Amtrak train with bulk currency. And so they called law enforcement in Humboldt County and they said, go to this person's house. And he did. And I was living there. And so I got raided. The Humboldt County Drug Task Force raided our home. They found currency in the attic. They did find cannabis, but under California's 215 laws, which is like the medical laws out there, the amount we had was permissible. So I went to jail for possession of marijuana and a few other things. And, when I got bailed out, I bought the domain, theemeraldmagazine.com. And originally I launched it as just a traditional lifestyles publication, and I covered Humboldt County and the Emerald Triangle. And then a little bit in, I flipped it over to a cannabis lifestyle media company and did that. Was monthly for 6-7 years. Moved out to New York in 2019 to raise capital for the media group. When the pandemic hit, went quarterly. So we still do print. We're more so digital though. We do articles frequently. We do a newsletter 3 times a week. We do podcasts and videos. We're very, very active on social media. And, we're all about just promoting the industry, doing product reviews, the cannabis lifestyle, because I remember back in the day, like when I was arrested, my mugshot was everywhere. I was posterized, I was, burnt. It was a very bad, traumatic situation. Like many people that are in the cannabis industry can relate to that, can relate to having their homes raided, can relate to getting arrested for cannabis. And it's malarkey, it's baloney, it's ridiculous. And so I relate to a lot of people like that. And I've made it my mission over the years to give cannabis positive representation. I didn't want people to think, oh, cannabis stoner. I want people to think like, contributing member of my community, contributing member of society. This person is a good human being. And just because they smoke cannabis doesn't mean that they're, a stoner or degenerate or whatever. So that's been like the mission of the Emerald over the years, is to just give a microphone to those who need to be heard, to tell their story, and then to also give a really positive portrayal of cannabis and how amazing the herb is, not only to ourselves, but our community. So.
That's right. And it can actually enhance your existence on this planet, because the supreme being, whether you believe in a god or any god, has put it on this earth for a reason. And the reason was it had medicinal qualities, and all the science and research that has driven the reform movement over the last half dozen to 20 years, really, it's been proven now. We know that there are positive aspects of this plant, but explaining this to those who still believe in what they were taught and told in the 70s and 80s and 90s, there's still a large stigma out there. There's still that prejudice and stereotype of the person who uses the product to make themselves feel better, to help them sleep, to combat nausea if you happen to be stricken with cancer and on a chemotherapy plan. So, these things have been proven and shown to have results. And now it's up to people like us, Christina. It's obvious when you start talking, I'm like, yeah, this is exactly why we're friends, because we see this as an opportunity to tell the stories of people who have been both negatively impacted by this plant, like yourself with a record, to those that have just been using it recreationally or medicinally in amounts that allow you to, again, contribute to society, have a normal existence, and still partake in the herb.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. I knew you'd go along with that. Hey, because you have that record, right? Because that's on your in your history, that is allowing you to kind of jump the line and apply for a license in New York, is it not?
No, not at all. I wasn't convicted of anything. I had my
Good. Okay.
charges dropped, but also that was in California.
Right.
So this is in New York, and so only people that found themselves in trouble in New York State qualify.
Gotcha. There you go. Right. And we can get into the in-state or out-of-state discussion if you'd like, because that too is an issue. And I'm sure with the various panelists that we have coming on in the next few hours that we'll be able to kind of paint the picture of what it's been like for those that are legally entered into this industry as business people. And you came to New York looking for funding for Emerald Magazine and Emerald Media. Have you been able to grow a little bit over the last few years?
Yeah, we did find some funding in the beginning, the first year, 2019, when I was out here. And then, COVID certainly put a halt to a lot of that. But we did grow. It was good. Reinvested in the company and, continue to stay strong. And now trying to expand with this recreational market as much as we can. Maybe we do a product line, maybe we, get a dispensary license. These are all things that we're considering, and we're hoping to just really grow our brand with the industry.
That's really what it's about now is growth. It's not only growth of the plant, but growth of the industry under a legal umbrella, following certain guidelines and regulations. And I guess the biggest question is, can the industry survive given all the compliance issues that everyone that has a license has to adhere to? And of course, we're in a very delicate time in our economy, with a maybe on the edge of a recession, but certainly a downturn for the industry. Investment money has dried up quite a bit. And, how do you view the state of the industry as of today, the end of 2022?
Well, I can say for the entrepreneurs on the ground that the struggle is real, and a lot of people, that are looking for funding feel a little depleted by their efforts. Certainly, don't give up. And I would encourage people to go outside of cannabis. I think that's one thing that a lot of people in our industry, we tend to run around in circles, because it is such a unique industry. And, sometimes people in other industries, they don't get us, it's a very special brand. You have to, you gotta like the brand. And so, but I would encourage people that are sourcing capital to, first and foremost, you have to go through your phone book and your cell phone. And you never know, someone who you didn't even think about, like maybe they don't have the ability to invest, but their uncle is interested or something like that. So I'd say start with your inner connection, all your friends and family who are likely not all in cannabis, and then try to go to mixers. I try to occasionally go to mixers outside of the cannabis industry for, traditional finance mixers. Here in New York City, there's a lot of those that go on. But I'd say like the industry, it looks hopeful to me personally. I think the industry looks very bright, and I think that those that are in it can survive through it. And it is a struggle, but you're not alone. And I know that can bring comfort, or that can not bring comfort sometimes. But again, for those of you that are actively looking for capital, I would encourage you to go outside of cannabis, because those individuals are, I've been in it again for 11 years. So, it's a labor of love for me. We've had fantastic years, and then we've had really hard years.
Right.
I think any business that's been in, if you've been in business over 2 years, the first 2 years are the hardest. After that, you kind of get the hang of it. But yeah, I would say try to build your network out. So
It is a network. That's what we are here at Pro Cannabis Media as well. Christina DiGiovanni is going to be my guest host for the next few panels as we have coming up. But it is a little past 4:20 on a Friday afternoon, and I know Miggy is out there already partaking. He's one of our regulars in the chat room, and he is in that chat room. I am kind of monitoring it as best I can over here outside of the frame. But feel free to chat, ask a question, and we will try to talk a little bit about that if I happen to check it out and see it, because I'm focused here, maybe not so much there, if you catch my drift. But it is that time again, every Friday afternoon. Now, Christina, you've watched this show. I know you've heard about this song that I play on at 4:20 most Fridays. It's called Shanty. It's by Jonathan Edwards. It was the song that was my version of the Waldos in the 70s, if you will, because every time my friends heard it on the radio, we went outside and we partake. You know, and that was from age 14 on, I might add. So that's why we play it every Friday afternoon around this time. And besides me telling you about Shanty, you had never heard of it before. Am I right?
Correct.
Because you weren't even around in the 60s and 70s. I get that too. All right, we're going to take a break and we'll have more of this show, Green Rush Live, on a Friday afternoon. After this, with Jonathan Edwards and Shanty. Don't go away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just... you know, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
Monica, we don't have Shanae. Got it. Okay, we're back. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Green Rush Live. Really live, you can tell. On a Friday afternoon, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Christina D. Giovanni from the Emerald Magazine Group is with us, as well as our guest host. And now we're joined by Monica Werkheiser, the head of operations for Canna Remedies, a New Jersey state license holder, and someone who has been in the garden state, in the cannabis space for a while now. Monica, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jimmy. I'm excited to be here.
Tell us a little bit about the history you have, maybe not personal history with cannabis, but in the business in New Jersey, because you've been there for a while now.
Yeah, let's not get into that personal history. You know, my mom might be watching, so we're going to avoid that part.
I'm not sure I'd be doing this business, by the way, if my mother was still alive. All right, so I can totally relate to that. Go ahead.
No, on the business side, I actually started out in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania required pharmacists, and that's actually my background. I'm a pharmacist by trade. They required pharmacists within their dispensaries. I teamed up with a mom and pop who were just looking for a part-time pharmacist, and they had me hooked. I started managing their dispensary. We operated 3. Unfortunately, got bought out by an MSO, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it. And now, you know, we're restarting. And what's nice is having managed their operations, they brought me on into the ownership circle. So now I am going to be not just an operator, but an owner and operator in New Jersey with our first adult use dispensary, which will be opening in the fall of 2023 in Ewing, New Jersey.
Wow. That everybody has a cannabis story, whether it's personal or in business in this case. And I am always fascinated. The road to commence operations, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has this long, drawn out process, whether you're in New Jersey or in Massachusetts or Maine, New York. And, you know, the people out west don't understand unless they were in it at the very beginning. And I know Christina spent quite a few years in Humboldt County. So she's been on both sides, if you will, of the plant. You mentioned you had a background in pharmacy. Where do you think this plant plays in the future? There are some very conservative voices out there who believe that this should be like a Schedule II drug, and big pharma should come in and control it, and then you should have to go to the pharmacy to get a prescription. I'm going out on a limb thinking you're not one of those people. Am I right?
No, that would be quite the opposite. While I respect, big pharma, I've worked in pharmacy. I've just seen the pitfalls that come. And it's funny, hearing these conservative legislators talking about cannabis and how it should be controlled too. You have Marinol, which is a C3, Epidiolex, coming in as a C, I believe 5. You have cannabis-based drugs already, which are lower classified in that scheduling system, and yet here you are saying cannabis can't be descheduled or rescheduled. Right. It's just a little absurd, if you will, and knowing that C1 is because of the high addiction potential. And one of the reasons I left traditional pharmacy was the amount of times I got threatened because I wouldn't dispense oxys soon enough. And I'm bound by law to have to dispense on a certain date. The prescription says I can only dispense on a certain date. That didn't matter. I mean, I definitely got threatened more in a pharmacy than I did in a dispensary. So it kind of comes to, let's relook at what you have approved already, because that's a lot worse than what you're trying to prevent coming to market. And big pharma is, we see the price of drugs and how that continually increases. So I don't know that would be the best bet either.
If you ever watch the Today Show in the morning on NBC, I'll give them a plug here. Every other commercial spot is another drug.
Yeah.
And by the way, those commercials cost a lot of money to be run on the Today Show. So again, maybe they don't even realize how big pharma is and the impact it has on our economy. And I don't understand why in the world we still have to explain this to our legislators. We still have to enlighten them on the plant medicine that it is. And most importantly, we're still learning about this plant. And if I can give a little credit to the fact that we have actually some historic moments in our news over the last few weeks, even when the president has signed a research bill for cannabis. And I think both sides of the aisle actually all agreed that more research is necessary. What's your feeling about the research effort on the plant?
For me, it was actually very exciting because it is one of those things that you see so many comments from, actually both sides of the aisle, but a lot more of older legislators always saying, well, there's not enough research. There's not enough research. Well, now that we can do the research, let me hear what you have to say then. And I don't mean to be so confrontational, but it is that point of you keep saying there's not enough research when there is. This is not new. There are plenty of countries that have been doing the research already, but because it's not done here, you don't want to acknowledge that research exists. So now that research can be done, I will be interested to hear where the naysayers will go next, because you can't hold on to that not having research anymore.
Yeah, and no disrespect to the research community, okay, but I've heard these studies that come out, spinning numbers and analyzing past research, and then they come out with this analysis. And I ripped ABC News because there was a headline about how cannabis use over the last 20 years, from 2000 to 2020, has increased emergency room calls by 245%. Well, hello, it wasn't that legal. It wasn't that available for 18 of those 20 years that they were studying the facts of. So again, it's how you spin the numbers, right? And I always say this to people, I'm like, how much more research do you really need? Go talk to people who have used this substance for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, okay? And do research with them.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's not even needing the anecdotal stuff. I mean, one of the interesting things in Pennsylvania is that they do require research to add a new medical condition. So again, I mean, you can say we can take the anecdotal. People don't like that though, because it's somebody's opinion. It's somebody feels. And I can understand that. I also understand the validity of it, but I also understand where people want hard scientific data, but that's still out there showing decrease of symptoms, how much that symptom load is gone. Nobody's touting that this is a cure-all, but what they are saying is symptom relief, which is one of the biggest things. And actually the next biggest thing that I see is side effect management. Working in pharmaceuticals, do you know how many side effects patients have? How many times I have HIV patients who are throwing up on a daily because of the medications they take. And if throwing up, it's not getting digested, which means you're not actually getting the medication that you need. So if we can calm the stomach with cannabis, now you're getting the medication that you need. That then is going to save your life. So it's these things of getting people to understand it doesn't just stop at, helping symptoms, but helping people to manage conditions that are very hard to manage through pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. The disclaimers at the end of all the drug ads that are on the Today Show in the morning, right? Christina, you're laughing because that I've railed about this before. They go on for a good 15 seconds, right? Yeah. And always the last one is, and could cause death, and don't take it if you're allergic. Now, how the hell do you know if you're allergic to something unless you take it?
Yeah.
Right?
It makes it interesting.
That's right. Christina, I know you probably have a few comments or questions. I just want you to jump in here any old time you want. Okay.
No, I just want to say congratulations on all your hard work and the journey that has brought you here. And just congratulations. It is. We were talking earlier about the state of the industry and where we think it is right now. And I said, I'm still very hopeful for a very bright future in this industry. I've been in it for 11 years and, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so, seeing you, sell a company and then come back, it's very inspirational.
Thank you. Love it. I love the hopeful thought too, though. Every once in a while, I find myself in that deep, dark place of it's never going to happen. Once again, this law hasn't passed. But I mean, we have to remind ourselves how far we have come and how much further we can still go. So It's exciting.
And I'm looking at our chat room and I'm going to straight out mention Dr. Libby Alone or Libby Alone and Miggy. I want you guys, both of you, to email me at Jimmy@ProCannabisMedia, please. I want to invite you on our holiday show next Friday. That will be pretty much what I would consider to be back in the day of radio, open lines. Okay. So if you send me your email, I'll make sure that you have a link. I know my director, Dan French, is freaking out right now, but this is what I want to do on the last show of 2022 is allow everybody who wants to join us to join us. And but I do want to go back to one of the things that you just mentioned, Monica, and you know, there is doom and gloom out there in the cannabis industry. Christina, I know you've heard it too, you know, where Curaleaf is laying off people, Weed Maps is laying off people. There's a market correction going on in cannabis. Is this a concern to you, Monica?
I don't want to say no, but my reality is no. I kind of look at it as there was this kind of pedal to the metal when we had the COVID spike. You know, the cannabis industry did flourish during COVID. And now I feel like we're just resettling for that. And I feel like there's some eye-opening moments that are coming through. One of the things I was actually discussing with a colleague of mine was how in his company, he feels like there's all these people that he has to talk to, but doesn't actually know what they do. And I think this like culture of where, and I've seen this not just in cannabis, but in many companies where we work from home and now people are regrouping and we've forgotten about so-and-so and, you know, working on this project and so-and-so. And I think it's just a moment of regrouping and regathering that's happening as far as the layoffs. But as far as business and dollars go, I mean, yes, are we lower than the boom of, you know, 2020, but we're still higher than when we started in 2019. So the cannabis industry is still growing. It's just we had an artificial spike. So we can't base everything off an artificial spike. I mean, it's just, we'd be silly to do that.
Right. Steady growth, slow and steady growth is actually better in the long run than quick growth. And everybody's doing a cash grab, which has really been kind of a description of what had been going on in cannabis, especially out west in the very beginning in Colorado and California. Christina, I do want to come back to you because I got your newsletter this week, as I do every week. And one of the articles that you started with here is Michigan man suit blocks licenses for New York dispensaries. Can you walk us through a little bit how this article came about and who this is and how important this is?
Sure. You know, this is very important for a lot of people that live in 5 different areas of New York. So essentially a Michigan man who was arrested for cannabis apparently, but not in the state of New York, has filed an injunction only 10 days before the Office of Cannabis Management was going to make their first round of decisions. So I believe 19 licenses are being held up by this injunction. And essentially this man is claiming a dormant cause. I don't know the exact name.
It's the dormant commerce clause. We've talked about it a lot on this show. Professor Robert Mikos of Vanderbilt University has been a guest on this show, and he wrote a paper about it. And since then, there have been multiple papers about it because this based, and then you go back to what the state of Maine came up with in a federal court saying, you know what, you can't just give out these licenses to in-state people. So as usual, goes back to what I've been saying since the very beginning. If you really want to make a good investment in this industry that is definitely going to make you money, invest in a law firm, because these laws are still being interpreted. And these lawyers are just going to sit back and say, yeah, I have an opinion about it. Yeah, I can argue that. I can argue that. That's the American way, isn't it?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I think we've all used a few different types of lawyers before. So, but yeah, essentially this guy, you know, he's got a lawyer that filed for him. I think this same attorney has filed before in Los Angeles, but there's a trail here. That's the real red flag. Is there's something in Sacramento, there's something in Los Angeles, there's something in New York. And so it's essentially just until the state, he's trying to put pressure on the state to say like anyone, no matter where you live, can apply for this. And New York is saying, no, if you were arrested in New York for a cannabis related crime, then we're going to help you now in the cannabis industry. And it makes sense. I mean, I was arrested in California, but I didn't try to, not that I was convicted or anything, but I didn't try to pursue anything in New York based on my arrest in California. I accepted the fact that that was California and this is New York. So, yeah, to be continued. Hopefully it ends soon. There's a lot of people waiting on these card application licenses here in New York. So,
Monica, I'm going to go back to you and ask you, this pattern of behavior that Christina has now described of this guy that is lawsuit happy, if you will, it seems like every element of our world works to retard the growth of this industry. Every person that doesn't support it, okay, he's looking for ways to either make it much more difficult to actually build a new industry. It's about the biggest challenge anybody has ever had in business. What's your feeling about the regulations and the compliance issues and all the stuff that licensed operators have to go through? And of course, you can even compare it to what's going on in New York that Christina explained. It's kind of like the Wild Wild West on the streets of New York right now.
It really is. What I do find interesting, I think the best analogy that I can kind of put it to is it's very hard to jump through the state's hoops when you're held down by so much federal and legal red tape. And that's really what it is. I mean, even in New Jersey, we had actually done a medical license in 2019. We did not get awarded that, but I do know a few people who did. And what was interesting is they weren't allowed. So 2019, you get approved. Now it's 2021, and they're just starting to announce. So people were holding real estate that whole time, or attempting to, and a few of those companies had to go under because they can't hold financially. You can't hold that long, especially when you don't have banking behind you. So you have those issues. Now in New Jersey, the big issue is real estate because you have all these municipalities which have zoned to certain areas. Well, if you have real estate in there, you've jacked up the price enormously because for some reason they think as cannabis businesses, we're just bleeding out millions of dollars. However, that is quite the opposite. I mean, 280E, we're lucky to be making, ends meet at the end of the first year. So it is those things that you just keep seeing continually, that between all these lawsuits, at the end of the day, that person just trying to scrape and get by is the one who's hurt the most.
Yeah, let's talk about the federal, shall we? First, here there's been a few things happened this week that I think the whole world has actually noticed. One, of course, is the release of Brittany Griner, a WNBA star and Olympian, and was caught with hash oil going through security at I think it was in Moscow, in a Russian airport, and then spent the last 293 days inside a Russian jail and in that whole system, and was finally freed. Now, I actually ranted about this a little bit on our LinkedIn page, and please, if you haven't followed us on LinkedIn, please do, about the fact that, this is great that Brittany Griner got out, thrilled. Paul Whelan is still in Russia, and he was a Marine and a businessman, and even though the Russians think he was spying, and I do not have any inside information about that, it's another example of Americans being detained falsely by foreign governments. This is an issue, but at least we could celebrate having Brittany freed. This is still a good thing, isn't it, Monica?
It is. And I have to look at it that way. I have to see the positivity. The positive light I see it in is it's another step that Biden and his administration are saying we shouldn't be incarcerating because of cannabis, because we shouldn't. And so I do look at the positive light of that, of it's just a way that our federal government is trying to, again, stand behind what they're saying. However, I also have mixed feelings, and it's a little bittersweet just because I look at not what's happening foreign, but what's happening domestically.
Right.
I mean, looking at a parallel, highly publicized case, you had, I believe it was Patricia Spotted Crow. This is back in 2010, arrested for selling $31 worth of marijuana. Okay. Let's be honest. We know the price of marijuana. A cartridge is worth a lot more than $31, and there was multiple. So we're comparing these two, African-American, and I believe Patricia was also Native American. minority young women who were penalized for having small amounts of cannabis. Now, Brittany, I'm so glad 10 months out of Russia, because that is not an easy feat. But this Patricia was sentenced to 12 years for that $31. And it took a whole 2 years for somebody to finally say, this is wrong, and parole her. Now, I know that's 2010, but let's bring it forward to 2019 when she's rearrested because she couldn't afford the court fees, because you can't get a loan, you can't get a job, you can't get housing because of that marijuana conviction. So now she can't afford to pay the fees and now is back in prison. Thank goodness, again, a year later, I mean, however you want to look at that as a thank goodness, is released again because they realized the wrongs, but that's one person who was lucky enough to release. So it just brings up these mixed feelings of, I'm so glad that Brittany Griner was released. I'm so glad that President Biden is standing behind this idea of we shouldn't be incarcerating because of cannabis, but I'm still, hurting for those people who domestically are still in prison, and just reminded why we need to support organizations like Freedom Grow, Marijuana Policy Project, Last Prisoner Project, all those organizations who are fighting to get people out of prison and back to their families.
That's right. Absolutely. And it's exactly what I think too. I mean, inconsistencies of law is not a good thing. And we even had one of the most conservative Supreme Court judges in our time mention that first before President Biden did anything. That, look, the fact that I lived to hear the day that a president of the United States actually used the word marijuana in a positive way, I was like, I can't believe I'm living here dealing with this. Christina, what was your impressions of Brittany Griner being released? I know everybody was happy that she was released, certainly, but again, it brings up the fact that there are thousands of people behind bars in our own country that can't get out.
Right. I believe that there's about 40,000 people still incarcerated for cannabis-related arrests that need review. It's a double-edged sword here. I am so happy that she's out. I think that it's so sad. And I thought about her during these last few months. Like, there were moments when she would come into my mind, and I would be like, what is she doing right now? Like, she's in this Russian penal colony. Like, what's happening to her? And so I'm glad she's out. It did shine light on, the changes that need to be made here at home. I do have immense sympathy for that other American who was left over there. I can't imagine if he even knows. I'm sure, maybe the guards have told him, but imagine feeling very abandoned by your country at that point. So I feel for that man, but, it's tough. When I travel, I always make sure, do I have any cannabis on me? Do I have anything on me? Because you don't want a situation like this to ever happen. Even if you get a ticket at the airport because you get caught with something, or I don't know, you don't want that. You have to ask yourself, is it really worth it? So it was an accident, and, she did not deserve 10 years in prison. And I think that was certainly a flex by Russia. And, so I just want to say to everyone out there that's traveling, just double check your stuff. I'm glad Brittany Griner's home. I hope that President Biden really, and the individual states really do push for just review of their prisoners. And and honestly, it helps all citizens. It's less tax money that we have to go put towards prison and housing inmates that don't need to be there. Right. So I think a review helps everyone.
Yeah, and of course, a sports figure can bring attention to a societal issue. It happens a lot in our history, and being a history buff and an educator at the college level, I do bring these things up a lot in our class here. But let's go back and talk a little bit about safe banking, if we will, because it too, the politics involved with the safe banking thing, the fact that one side of the aisle tried to attach it to the national defense budget that had to be passed, pissed off the other side of the aisle. And I'm tired of these elected officials, especially in the Senate, playing these kinds of games with an industry now that can help the economy. It can bring jobs. It can save people's lives. It can change people's lives. But again, getting it through the thick head of our elected officials sometimes really frustrates me. Monica, do you think we'll ever see safer banking practices ever pass in the next, well, let's see, what do we got, a week left in the lame duck Congress?
I was like, this year, no. Ever, I mean, ever is a long time. So yes, and ever, it's going to happen eventually. But, you know, in the next year, 2 years, that's still doubtful. I mean, there, like you said, there is too much politicking. There is too much back and forth. The fact that because safe banking doesn't have social justice in it or doesn't have this, you know, we have to take the small wins where they're at. We got a research bill through. Let's get banking through. Next step, you know, this industry wasn't built all at once. It was built state by state, inch by inch. So why we're trying to change all laws at once rather than taking one single win is actually driving me a bit insane, because it really is that moment of, guys, take one win, just take the one win and move forward, then move to the next step. It is okay that we are still missing bits and pieces, because at the end of the day, yes, we don't have a social equity clause, but do you know what that banking bill will do for social equity applicants?
Right.
You know, as a woman, I see so many women who need funding, and most women who fund their own businesses do it through small business loans. We don't have access to that in cannabis. So already there, you're kind of excluding people in just not making that simple step of saying yes to safe banking.
Yeah. Hey, Christina, when we first met back in 2019, I remember that women held, I think it was certainly over 20% of C-level jobs and positions in the cannabis industry at that time. And it has now shrunk, I believe, to 8%. I might be off by a 1 or 2% on that. What's your feeling about the fact that there is dwindling impact of women in the cannabis space?
You know, I think that I think that number was higher than 20%. I think it was 30%. And that was like phenomenal across all industries, because it was the number one industry with the most female held positions, you know, executive positions, and 8%. Oh my gosh, that's painful to hear. I was not aware the number had gone low. How unfortunate. It is a challenging industry. I mean, it's going to be challenging until it's federally decriminalized. You know, and I think that those of us that have held on for years and years, I think we still have, you know, a little bit more of a journey to go. And I don't, you know, I can only offer advice to people that want to hang in it, you know, that really love cannabis, is, you know, try to also get something else that you're good at or that you love that can also financially support you while you wait it out. So, you know, and I don't know. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And so, you know, it would be hard for me to go and get like a 9 to 5 somewhere, but it depends on what circumstance I was in. And if I was, you know, just trying to make my business go, you know, I mean, it's a labor of love. I feel like I've been in it, even though I've professionally been in the industry for almost 11 years, you know, I started consuming cannabis when I was 15 years old. So I've been in it for a very long time, 16 years, almost half my life. So.
Whoa, half your life, Christina, 16 years. Whoa.
Wow, that's crazy. It's crazy.
It's a good percentage. Let's just go right there. All right. Because, you know, I think Christina is laughing behind the camera because she knows I talk about this all the time, being 65. Monica, before we hit the top of the hour, I do want to talk to you a little bit about the role of the MSO in this movement. You know, they're vilified a lot by consumers of cannabis, a lot of the community that's just trying to get into it. They see them as the evil empire, if you will, to coin a phrase, another sports reference there. But what I actually say, I think the MSOs have played a huge role in this movement because they've been able to fund lobbyists in Washington, D.C. And also they bought you, didn't they?
They did. They did. It's a double-edged sword. It really is, you know, and it all comes down to the company itself. There's going to be good MSOs and bad MSOs at the end of the day. Ones who think they're above the law and ones who are trying to push the law forward for us. And I think, we can all sit here and say, we can't blanket. Not all MSOs are bad, but not all MSOs are going to be doing the work that they said they should.
Right.
So again, double-edged sword. I look at it as, yes, we got bought out by an MSO, which killed my heart simply for the fact that I love the business that I ran. I loved it. It is still my passion. That's why I stay in it. So it killed to have to sell what we built. But at the same time, it also made a lot of money. So now I can do the next venture. It looks at it that way. There's things like that. But I do look at certain MSOs that really are pushing the buck for social equity. Those who are showing up on Capitol Hill and saying, hey, we need to be doing this. Here's the dollar value behind it. They have the data. They have the technology to be showing them. I mean, it is a numbers game completely in the Senate. So if they can show the data of why this is a viable industry and where we need to go with it, we do need the MSOs as much as people want to complain. It's just, how do we filter out the bad MSOs and really stand behind those that are pushing the cannabis movement forward?
I am shocked to hear that humans complain about things. I really am. I mean, don't we need to just chill out and accept all the bad? No, we need to continue to open our mouths, be heard, and share our feelings and emotions on what is going on in our world, in our business, because there are still a lot of things that are going on that, we have to change. The division in our country has to change. We've forgotten about the fact that we are all one family of humanity and one country under God. I remember this was how this country started, being an old history major. Monica, thank you so much. It was great to have you on. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you. And Christina, awesome to meet you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right back at you. And by all means, I do spend some time in New Jersey. It was the state of my birth. My parents gave me Newton, Massachusetts at age 4. Not that I had any choice in that one, but I was certainly happy for it. And I'm very grateful for it as well. So, Monica, how do people, if they want to check out Keystone Canna Remedies, right? Where do they find it online, obviously?
So we're Canna Remedies now, and our website is cannaremediesnj.com. You can find us on Instagram as Canna Remedies NJ. You can find us on Twitter as Canna Remedies, on Facebook as Canna Remedies. If you want to reach out, just email at info@cannaremediesnj.com.
Any issues with our friends in social media?
Not yet.
We're keeping up, whatever you're doing.
Just bare minimum.
That's right. Well, I appreciate that. All right, we got a few more coming in. In fact, next up, our pal Deborah Borchardt is going to join us at the top of the hour. So don't go away. Green Rush Live, really live this Friday afternoon. We'll continue after this.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways, and they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
It's the whole package. Not only is it the exclusion, we talked earlier about how experienced is your rep you're talking with. Do they do it full time? Do they do it 5% of the time? Do they have a dedicated back office? How long they've been doing it? There's a lot of people trying to cash in the insurance. The forefathers, like my company, we've been doing it for 3 years, and now they're trying to cash in. That's okay. We like competition, but we know that we're going to come out on top most of the time. As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm PCM founder Jimmy Young, and you're probably wondering, what am I doing on a growing show? After all, I'm a convicted plant killer. That's why I surround myself with these beautiful plastic babies. But now I have found the secret to all those people out there who just don't want to deal with growing a plant indoors or outdoors. You just don't have enough confidence. Hey, check out greengoddesssupply.com. That's where you'll find the armoire system. Basically, it's growing for dummies like me. Check it out. The Armoire at greengoddesssupply.com. And welcome back to the really live Green Rush, the Business of Cannabis talk show that we run here every Friday afternoon on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and sometime host of this program. Josh will be with us. Josh Kincaid hopefully will be with us next week. We're going to reach out to Rick Thompson, another member of our Read Talk News team, to join us. And it's our holiday show. We'll be talking about the top 5 stories in cannabis this year. And we did this last year too. And I find it interesting because last year we really had to talk a lot about what were the biggest stories. This year, there were a ton of big stories, and covering them all is one of our dear friends and regular contributor to We Talk News, the Green Market Report founder herself, Deborah Borchardt. Hello, Deborah.
Hello, Jimmy.
And I know you know both Christina and Tanya Osborne, who joins us from the Director of Community Engagement and Digital Production of Women Grow. And the two of you, Deborah and Tanya, were together last night. And Christina had an event in New York, too, for women. So first of all, Tanya, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about what you do in your role as the Director of Community Engagement.
Thank you for having me. First off, I actually follow you. I was trying to see if I could see you on Twitch because I remember you guys used to be on Twitch because
we still are.
Are you? Okay.
Oh, yeah. It's Twitch/Pro Cannabis, twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media.
Fantastic. So my name is Tanya Osborne. I am the Director of Community with Women Grow. Women Grow is a professional networking organization for women entrepreneurs, business leaders, and advocates in the space. We've been around since 2014. And my role is really aiding and supporting our partnerships, supporting really making sure that these women-led brands that are looking for support, you know, making sure I go out and find women-led brands. And we've been doing a lot of work with some of the conversations that we're going to have today about getting funding and really just being a support, connecting leaders. We've had organizations grow literally in our when we were doing in-person events, co-founders were connected, clients were born, building your brand, etc. So it's really just a conduit to women entrepreneurs building their business.
And Deborah Borchardt and I were both at the ArcView event in New York City a few weeks ago. Our ArcView actually is wrapping up another one of those investment conferences in Miami today at this time, and it's one of the reasons why we couldn't get our friend Jamie Pearson to come on. But Deborah, you were there, and Tanya just talked about access to capital. That is a constant theme in this business and industry, isn't it?
It is, and it really isn't really just limited to women right now. As you probably have discussed on your show multiple times, it's really hard to get capital right now within the industry. And the people that are managing to get some money, they're getting it at what I would say aren't the most desirable terms. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be very telling in the next 6 months who can survive this, because I think there's several small companies and businesses that are running out of runway to be honest. And if they can't get that investor dollar, they may not make it. So I think it's going to be really tough for several. And I also am so disappointed in how New York has moved so slowly to get their market up and running, and the mistakes that were made. And I think that that's really hurt the overall industry, in my opinion, because I think New York is going to be such a huge market and so impactful on the whole industry that by having some of these mistakes happen, I think it's going to be really tough to recover from it, and I think it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, it's that doom
But
and gloom.
I see the one person on the screen that I think is going to buck that trend, and I've said multiple times, I think they're going to be the first ones to market are the Shinnecock.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I
And is
literally
that-
just said that earlier on an Instagram live with Andrew D'Angelo.
Yeah. Oh yes.
And then here you are, Shanae's on.
There you go. Well, it's funny. I saw Shanae pop in, and again, it's literally 15 feet away with a font about that big. So, but Shanae, thank you so much for joining us. And let's talk a little bit about that, because Gary Santo from Tilt Holdings was on our show last week. I think it was last week. I can't remember if it was yesterday or last week. But walk me through. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you're unmuted, Shanae, and tell us about Little Beach Harvest. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad that, we are a part of the conversation. I think that's the biggest thing as Indigenous people, is we're usually not even a part of the conversation. So I really thank you for even just adding that to a conversation, which creates more education to people that are listening and viewing and just learning about the overall industry. Who is Little Beach Harvest? Well, Little Beach Harvest is a wholly owned cannabis business by the Shinnecock Nation. And I say that because it makes me very proud to be able to say that. I think all of our tribal members, we always like to say we wholly own it. And the biggest reason is because a lot of times when you see social equity deals and joint ventures, usually with minority businesses, there's usually some sort of equity that individual or that organization usually gives up, but we didn't. We wholly owned, right? So I like to say wholly owned by the Shinnecock Nation. I will forever say that. I think our Instagram even says that, our chairman and everyone else. But that's what makes us very unique, right? Because it is a sovereign business. The business, the LLC was actually was chartered out of the nation. So the secretary of the Shinnecock Nation, that's how we got our LLC. Most businesses, you get your LLC from the secretary of the state, whatever state you're filing, right? So the whole business is a sovereign business and unique within itself. And I think what's unique is that we have this partnership with Tilt, who is our operational partner, but they've been able to roll up their sleeves and really understand like what the challenges are, not only for Shinnecocks, but the other tribes within the state and other tribes in the country. And so Little Beach Harvest, we broke ground this summer. July 11th was the official date of our groundbreaking ceremony. And, so I'm kind of in some rugged clothing because I've been on site and just kind of very present this week and next week, as we're towards the end of the year. Just making sure everything is going right to the start of next year. So we'll be opening next year, early next year. And then I think what was stated just a little bit, Deborah, you had mentioned like we might be soon to be like ahead of the state. But what's important to note that, yes, you have Little Beach Harvest, which is the tribe's business, but the tribe itself also has something called a CRD, which is the Cannabis Regulatory Division. So that board is what essentially regulates the whole cannabis business and anything cannabis on Shinnecock. So you have the tribe that has a business, which is Little Beach Harvest, and we've been issued a medical license, and we will be going for a recreational adult use license underneath CRD. The tribe, they issue that, we get the license, and that's how we're able to operate. And then individuals will have that. And so it is taking some time also for us to be able to do it, but I think we are a lot further along, I'd say, than maybe the state is in just trying to get their ducks in a row with regulations.
Fantastic. What a great story. And it's about time, by the way. Christina, being in that neck of the woods, has Emerald Magazine been out to the Shinnecock Nation yet and done a little story out there?
No, we have not done a story out there. We, coming from Humboldt County, there were a few tribal nations out there. So I love what you guys are doing, and I'm really excited to follow it along. My friends over at Honeysuckle Magazine have been out there, I believe,
Right.
and so I followed them. And we do have a list on the Emerald's website. We have a few lists. It's 100 plus minority founded businesses to support right now. So we have the Black founded, we've got the Latinx founded, LGBTQ, Indigenous founded. And I'm going to double check to make sure that you guys are on that list because you should be, if not. But when I will double check after this.
There you go. Good job, Christina. I appreciate it. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but yes, I did actually.
I'm listening. I was engaged in her story. I was listening. I was like, oh yeah, tell me more.
Well, I think the last time I talked to Gary, he said that he thought maybe March.
Yes. So, and that, that's another factor. I think a lot of times what I'm here, I mean, my job as CEO is to answer all of those high level questions, right? But as what most people don't realize is commercial construction is not just like, oh, you pick a date and this is when it happens. You're also talking about the Northeast. You're talking about Shinnecock, which building on tribal territory is different than building on just anywhere else in the country. There also sometimes has to be agreements and things that are signed between both governments. So you're talking water authority, you're talking electricity, you're talking putting that on sovereign jurisdiction. So it's not as just as the easy walk in the park as just, oh, we're going to open doors on this particular day. And then it's the wintertime that we're also doing this. So, things are slower, and it is the Hamptons. Over the summertime, I think we were competing just a little bit with the build of some of the millionaires. So sometimes when we are trying to source as much as we might be able to more local subcontractors for our the contractor that we do have, our general contractor. They've been really good at being able to kind of bring in some more local. And sometimes that makes it difficult too, because they might have other things going on. So we have said that the end of March is kind of what it's looking like. But again, we have no idea what the winter, what creator is going to bring upon us. And so my main thing is making sure it's all done right. That's what I tell everyone on the team. And that's what I would tell the public is as long as it's done right, then that's what matters. We want to be able to open our doors in a good way. And I don't want it to be rushed just because people are just so excited. It has to be done right.
You mentioned the word opportunity. As someone who certainly knows the history of our nation and what those who came to this nation first from the other side of the pond have done to those that were here first, it's about freaking time that we give an opportunity to the Indigenous people, to our friends, the Native Americans, and also, I might add, those have been most impacted by the failed war on drugs. And but they make it, they being the man, okay, yes, the white man, okay, does everything possible to make it as difficult as possible to take advantage of that opportunity. Am I wrong here? Chime in here, Tanya. Go ahead, everybody, because that's how I feel. And it's one of the reasons why I love doing these live shows and talking to people, because it's like we have to get the word out. It is Gary Santo and I talked about this, and I love dropping his name. The fact that it's about normalization, not necessarily legalization. Decriminalization, no doubt about it. That's part of the normalization, though. That's what we have to start thinking about. And those that are in the industry have an obligation to enlighten and educate those who continue to look at this particular plant and opportunity as, let's just say we have to sell them on it, enlighten them before we can actually thrive. It's survive to thrive. Deborah, did I rant a little too much there, or was I on board?
you
Are you
know,
on board?
Jimmy, that was what was behind us starting Green Market Report. As a financial reporter, I was covering all these other industries, whether it was consumer tech or retail apparel or even just the financial markets. And that was the thing that struck me way back. I started covering this before Colorado even had legalized adult use. And I felt back then that this was going to be really a disruptor in the business community. And as I got further into my reporting on the industry, I felt like it just wasn't being taken seriously.
Right.
And I really wanted to create something that covered the industry from that point of view, that treated cannabis like any other industry, to elevate the respect that it deserved, and to acknowledge that this was an industry like any other, that it was going to be full of entrepreneurs, there was going to be a lot of money, there was going to be a lot of opportunity, and there were going to be good players and bad players. And so I mean, that to me was very important. I mean, even till today, it's my pet peeve when I see a mainstream media outlet do the weed puns, and you know, and they like
It
play on
is
the word
annoying.
pot, and it's just like, oh, stop doing that. I hate
Right.
that.
If I could chime in a little bit, just to say, I think a re-education has to
Yes.
happen.
Right.
And the re-education is, you know, truly these industries that people talk about being male dominated, we understand how that happened. Just look back historically, we understand how we got here. But to keep it that way, to put roadblocks to prevent the evolution of industry, that's a problem. But I do want to spotlight, there are folks, I'm an eternal optimist, so just you say boo, I'm like, but you know, that's just me. I think there are folks out there that are willing to learn, that are willing to be like, okay, how do I take my role and empower the voices of women? Like we did, Women Grow did a thing in September with Benzinga. Benzinga is, you know, they're an industry, they do events, they do, you know, publications, what have you. They were very open to knowing what their blind spots were. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it's
So-
actually, I'm actually glad to hear that a media company was doing that.
Yeah, and now that their eyes are open, you know, we did a really great partnership with them in September, spotlighted a bunch of women, put a bunch of women on the pitch floor, supported them in that process. So now they see, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So I think as more companies realize, and it is annoying, how do you not realize? Like, how did you miss that? But you know, it's like, hey, some people just need to be shaken a little bit. But I think there are players that are willing to open that. We just need more of those players.
Shanae, you're one of the newer players. I'm guessing that you see this opportunity as a way to impact your own little nation out there. Am I right?
Yeah, you know, what's interesting is one of the things that I tell a lot of the people that are on the various teams that, you know, Little Beach Harvest is working with, is that like, it's not just business for us. You know, anything that we do as a nation always can possibly chip away at our sovereignty when we move. And you had mentioned something earlier about, you said that, two different words. And the first thing I thought about was colonize and decolonize, you know? And so in many ways, we are, I guess, decolonizing the structure of business through cannabis on the Shinnecock Nation, right?
Wow.
And with that being said, we're also trying to make amends relationships that were not the strongest. It's no secret that New York State has not had good relationships with tribes in New York. Almost any other tribe in the country could tell you that. There are a lot of case studies that tribes look at pertaining to New York and New York tribes when it comes to commerce, when it comes to land, when it comes to all kinds of things. And that's just the history of the government of New York. So with that being said, Tanya was just saying, like, the educational component of it is so important.
Yep.
And I think that Shinnecock has been able to not only just really advocate for Little Beach Harvest and what we're trying to do, but we've really been able to make light on the government to government relationships that need to be had, not only just in New York State, but across the country. We're not the only tribe having difficulty here. And the biggest thing is, like, yes, we don't need permission to enter in the cannabis industry. I think I came into the industry saying that we don't need permission. You know, we have our own licenses, we have our own ordinances, but at the same time, there are a lot of roadblocks that are put in place if we're not included in the language of the policies in the state. For example, if we wanted to do something with the our relatives upstate and we wanted to do trade with the other tribes, that ancient highway, which is now considered 95 or whatever highway it's now considered, is in the state's possession there. That's underneath the jurisdiction of the state. And that's what makes it challenging. So there has to be government to governmental agreements between tribal governments and state governments. And this is not the only thing that Shinnecock is saying. We're hearing tribes across the country literally echo the same thing. And so I think in this industry, when we talk about all of the social equity groups and we're advocating for each other, it does require education to know what's happening in the Latino community and how can we echo what their issues are so that they can have justice, so they can have equality. What's happening with women in the industry and how can we echo what's happening with women, and the same thing with Indigenous people. So therefore, it's not just if you have Black, white, Latino, Asian, it's not just other, you are including Native Americans, and you know exactly what should be put into that. And so I think when it comes to cannabis, cannabis is just like one issue that we're addressing, but we're talking commerce. Right. We've been trading for thousands of years. And so it's actually a part of the very treaties that we have with the states. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of revisiting something. So it's just really, like you said, there's always something, you said it early on, there's always something that's just going to try to just, you know, either they're going to try to take from us, or they're just going to try to put a big challenge. And if we're just a small group that only knows about this and no one else knows about it, then we're not able to really kind of move that challenge or move forward with that challenge. We need support. We need advocacy. And that's where we've been able to see in the industry so much support from so many people, whether I've been pulled into a panel or people have actually just been calling, or when they're in a meeting, they bring up, hey, have you guys talked to the Shinnecocks? You know, that's a big deal, and that goes a long way.
Yeah. Well,
I will say, Jimmy, that the event they had in the Bronx this morning, I thought was pretty good. I wasn't sure what to expect out of it for New York State. I mean, I you know, said a few fairly not so positive things about the state earlier, but I did think that what they did today was pretty impressive. They set up this mock dispensary, and the whole idea is they did this in the Bronx, and it's a 3-day event so that they want the people in the community to come in, see what a dispensary looks like, not only from the front of the house, but also to kind of show them what goes on in the back of the house. There's several vendors there. There's several educational groups. The unions are there. I thought it was really cool. So the idea that they've got there is to bring people from the community. So they cited it in the Bronx, and so that it's educational, so that they can really kind of kick the tires and learn a lot about, you know, this industry that they might not have as much information about as we do as insiders. Right. And so I was impressed that when they had the people up on the stage, almost everybody on the stage was woman today. It was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is awesome.
And Christina, you're in Brooklyn. I mean, being from Boston, isn't that right next to Bronx? Did you get to go?
I was going to go today, but I was going to go with an industry friend, and it was her daughter.
I'm going on Sunday.
Yeah, it was her daughter's birthday today, so we're going tomorrow morning to check it out. But the Bronx it's not close to me. I think it's about an hour away from where I live.
Everything is an hour away in New York City, okay? Come on. I went from Brooklyn to Newark. It took me 2 hours, okay?
Right time, that sounds right.
Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock is not the time to go fast, okay? It's just not going to happen, right, guys? Something you guys all know. I'm the country bumpkin from Boston. What can I tell you? Hey, this was great. Listen, we have another woman coming on in the next few minutes, and it's Kim Sanchez Real from Azuka. So if any of you would like to stay and hang out with us, and we open up the forum, totally okay. And you don't even have to give me an answer, because we'll figure it out if you're here after this next break. How's that? Simple enough? Because this was a great conversation. We'd love to have you stay till the top of the hour. But if you can't, we totally understand. And I thank you for taking the time out on Friday afternoon. But we're not done on Green Rush Live, and we'll have more after this.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
It's the whole package. Not only is it the exclusion, we talked earlier about how experienced is the rep you're talking with. Do they do it full time? Do they do it 5% of the time? Do they have a dedicated back office? How long they've been doing it? There's a lot of people trying to cash in the insurance. The forefathers, like my company, we've been doing it for 3 years, and now they're trying to cash in. It's okay. We like competition, but we know that we're going to come out on top most of the time.
And welcome back for the final 30 minutes of the really live Green Rush Business of Cannabis talk show we run here every Friday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and sometimes host of this program. I love the fact that we have been doing this Friday afternoon live talk show since September of 2020, over 2 years now in this time slot. And we've had some of the biggest names in the cannabis industry join us for open talk and discussion about the business of cannabis. Christina DiGiovanni has decided to grace us with her presence for another 30 minutes. Thank you very much, Christina.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right. And joining us now for the final half hour is Kim Sanchez Real. She is the CEO of Azuka. It is a leading edibles ingredients company that serves the global cannabis community. And Kim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to see you, Jimmy.
Tell us about Azuka, because I've seen Azuka at, am I right, at trade shows and the like. The brand is kind of well known in dispensaries. I'm from Massachusetts, but I do get out of the state once in a while. Tell us about the growth of this company and what it's all about. Go ahead.
Sure. So at Zuka, we specialize in what I call the advanced formulations subsector of cannabis. And what we do is we develop ingredients and formulations for brands and manufacturers to make ingestible cannabis, fast-acting, great tasting, highly bioavailable, and also deliver a Delta-9 euphoric effect in an edible form that you can typically only get from smoking the plant. So we do a lot of innovation around the plant and around making non-inhalable cannabis available, approachable, easy to use, cost-effective to manufacture.
That's fantastic, because the first thing I said to the bud tender when I got my medical card in 2013 was, I've smoked it for a long time. I'd like to try not to smoke it and see if I can get the same effect. Now, that was in 2013. And let's just say the edible universe has evolved quite a bit since 2013. What's been the biggest factor in that quick acting, what they call that fast acting formula? How important has it been to discover that element of it?
Well, we've all heard the stories, right, about the edibles experience. You take one, you don't feel anything, you take another, you don't, and, pretty soon you may end up over consuming, right? So what's really important to me is to create a cannabis experience that is close to the plant, right? Delivers the benefits that this plant can deliver to the human body and the human experience, but does it in a way that is predictable and enjoyable for the consumer. So what's key is this, the first problem we set out to solve was the onset problem, right? Why wait 45 minutes or 90 minutes or longer? And the real crux of the matter is, cannabis oil, the active THC or other cannabinoids, they're an oil molecule, and it's hard for your body to metabolize an oil molecule. So what our formulations do is we take this oil molecule and we make it more compatible with the human body. And sometimes I use this little prop. Think of this tennis ball as a single molecule of THC oil. Could be distillate, could be another extract, could be live resin. And our process encapsulates it in a nice little hydrophilic or water-friendly coating at a single individual molecular level. And so what that does is two things, because our body is over 60% water. When you ingest this little thing, it could be in a gummy, it could be in a cookie, it could be in a beverage, it could be in anything, right? A tincture, your body is able to absorb the cannabinoid in the soft tissues and reach your endocannabinoid receptors in 5 to 15 minutes instead of 45 minutes or longer. So in addition to that fast onset, this formulation also enables what I mentioned earlier, which is for the consumer to experience the THC in its Delta-9 THC form, which is what smokers experience, right? Traditional edibles, the THC is broken down by the liver into 11-hydroxy THC. That 11-hydroxy THC is the molecule that causes, it's very sedative. It causes like the couch lock effect, and there's a place for that, right, in some medical applications and sleep applications. But sometimes you want to keep that nice little Delta-9 THC molecule full, but without smoking it. So that's what we do.
Great. And that's a great show and tell. And I love it when you break it down that way, because I never had very good luck with chemistry growing up in college. It was something I avoided like the plague. Christina, I know the two of us have enjoyed the plant in many different ways. Your preference, I think, is now moving away from inhaling it through smoke. And aren't you looking for other alternatives?
I do like the fast acting absorption. So yes, Jimmy actually recently introduced me to an aerosol spray recently. And I really
Yellow Labs, we'll give them a plug. Yellow Labs, it's available at Berkshire Roots and 2 locations in Massachusetts. It's a little under the tongue spritz of 3 milligrams of THC. Water soluble, Kim. Are you familiar with that product by any chance?
I have not come across it, but I live in the great state of New Mexico. But it sounds like a really interesting delivery method.
And the guy from Rhode Island, and now it's coming to Massachusetts. I think it's in Ohio dispensaries too. But so you like that, right, Christina?
did like that. I want some more of that. I was really into that. I felt the effects very quickly. I had never tried something like that, at least with THC. I'd tried it with CBD before. And it was a pleasant surprise. So.
And let me go back to Kim now. Now that you've got the edible world, and are you always looking for other ways to titrate?
So I'd say we are always looking for ways to deliver cannabis to consumers in an even better way. So, for example, I like to talk about we're in what I call the 5th generation of edibles, and that's kind of a whole little white paper essay that I've written. But right now, most edibles are made with distillate, which is a lovely thing. It used to be, plant and then, canna butter. And so over time, ingestibles have become more and more predictable. But in some ways, they've grown a little bit away from the plant in the integrity of the plant, because distillate is, an extract. You lose a lot of the, terpenes and other cannabinoids when you're just trying to get your THC extract to put into a recipe. So one of the things that we've spent a lot of time on, and I'm super excited to be bringing to market, is a way to deliver a true full flower, full entourage, full terpene, full cannabinoid effect in an ingestible form without sending that lovely cannabis flower through distillation or other extraction process. So basically to be able to go from flower into a fast acting, full entourage, full terpene profile ingestible. So that's, so to kind of answer your question, what's exciting to me right now is, is the constant innovation in this category, but now really taking our team and focusing on getting back and closer to the integrity of the plant itself, right? Let's go back to nature, not just, the ingestibles based on the THC extract alone, the distillate alone. So I think you've seen this also in the industry, a lot of conversation about trends towards premiumization, looking at, advanced cannabinoids to expand the experience for consumers. So we think those are super exciting trends in the industry. And again, always getting back to the power of the plant.
Right. Absolutely. And there's a reason why the plant is female. It is not lost on me. Okay. It took me, that was one of the most enlightening discussions I had with a grower who explained to me that the flowering plant is the female plant, and that is the one that everyone enjoys. In fact, there's one right over my shoulder here, because it has beauty, it has power, similar to the gender of humanity, I might add. That being said, in this industry, women are carving out a niche, but perhaps not as fast as it once was, Kim. In the beginning, I think there were a lot more women in C-level positions, and then big money came in and merged and acquired and moved stuff around. And now, again, women perhaps are more of a minority at the C-level in cannabis industries than others. Are you seeing any more of a trend of more women getting into the industry now?
I think that's a mixed bag. Unfortunately, most of my background is in the tech industry, so technology, venture capital, and when I first came into this industry, I was asked that question frequently, right? Is this, is this going to be the first multi-billion-dollar industry dominated by women? And I'd say, well, follow the money, right? Follow the money. Look at who's making decisions about the placement of capital. And unfortunately, in the years that I've been in the industry, and I joined the cannabis industry in 2017, we've seen a decline in women executives. We've seen a decline as a percentage, right? The gross number has gone up because there have been a lot more companies started. But as a percentage, right now, the latest data I've seen, only about 8% of cannabis companies have female CEOs. Only about 11% of cannabis investors are women, right? So there's a direct correlation there because people tend to place their capital. We all have implicit bias behind people who feel familiar, right? So you see an awful lot of companies in this industry run by, white men, and it's hard for women to raise. It's hard for anybody to raise capital in this industry right now. Obviously, you guys have seen the numbers,
Yep.
but I am sad to say, from a macro level in the industry, when I walk into a trade show today, it doesn't, from a gender representation perspective, it doesn't look all that different from a tech conference I was at, 15 years ago, sadly. Now we can turn that around. We can do some things about that, right? What can we do about it? I'd like to see and encourage everyone to, I love the, buy weed from women. I love that. And even in our companies, supporting and mentoring women within our companies or in our networks. There are wonderful women who I've had the incredible pleasure of working with in this industry, like Nancy Whiteman, one of our brand partners, and Nancy walks the talk, right? She really does. And, there are others. So I think we can take a page out of Nancy's book and of other, true women icons in the industry, then support women, invest in women, buy from women, and, hopefully pull some balance back into the industry.
Absolutely. And one woman that I have a lot of respect for has been my guest host since the beginning, and that's Christina DiGiovanni, who actually gave a great piece of advice. And I haven't brought it back up again because I was waiting for the right time. But her advice was, don't just stay in the cannabis investment community, network outside of that. Right, Christina?
Right. I think that, for people that are trying to grow their brand in the cannabis space, it's always good to start, when I say local, I mean, who's close to your heart, go through your phone book, but because the majority of those people are not going to be in the cannabis industry, they're going to be your close friends, they're going to be family. And then to, seek capital in the industry, but also to go outside of the industry, bring outsiders in. That's actually what we need. We need more people to get involved in this industry. And so just takes a conversation. You never know, I've had friends that have referred me to their uncles that have been interested, and so, stay in, but go out at the same time.
There you go. Well, it's important to get, and Kim, you've lived it, and other guests on our show earlier today talked about it too, that the male still controls a lot of the money in this country. And I think it's really interesting because anybody who's been in a relationship, okay, and I'm going to say a heterosexual relationship just because that's where I'm most comfortable. That being said, I always let the female kind of dictate what goes on in the relationship. You make the plans. I'll be happy if you're happy, kind of a thing. And yet in the real world and in business, men still dictate a lot of the policies and where the money gets invested. How is that frustrating, or am I missing something there, Kim?
Well, I think the data bears that out, right? As I said, follow the money. Who's making the capital placement decisions in this industry? It's still 90% men based on the data. So, that's frustrating. I think the punchback on that is for my female colleagues to, build strong businesses, right? Focus on the fundamentals. It was funny. I was at the finance forum at a recent trade show, and the talking heads were, all talking about, companies need to focus on being profitable and tighten your belt and efficient operations. And I mean, that's business 101. So, what I would say is be an investable business, whether you're run by a woman or a man. We have a lot of that problem in the industry as well. There are a lot of businesses that, frankly, regardless of the fact that cannabis or not cannabis, if I was looking at them as an investor and I have a long investment background, there's no business model, right? There's no scalability. There's, you have to really, and you have to be 10 times as creative in this industry as in, versus a conventional industry because of all of the constraints in cannabis, because you don't have interstate commerce. So,
I'm
know,
gonna, I'm gonna challenge you on that interstate commerce thing. You're in the edible universe, aren't you?
yes, sir.
And can't you replicate your recipe for your edible in another state? Doesn't that go on?
Absolutely. And that is our business model. So I tell people all the time, we look more like a biotech company. We're an intellectual property licensing company. We license everywhere, right? In 20 states and Canada and Puerto Rico. We're going overseas as we speak.
Right.
And that's what I mean. Like it takes a lot of creativity to figure out how to build a scalable business model. There are other people in this industry, our competitors who have a different business model, right? And they're not as scalable as we are, right? So I would just call on all of the entrepreneurs in this industry to build good businesses, right? You got to build good businesses. You got to build scalable businesses.
Christina, how's that going for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's so good.
We're trying.
Yeah, I've been doing the Emerald for over 10 years now. It'll be 11 years in January, and I'm applied with a business partner out here for a retail dispensary license. So hopefully that can come through. And, if not, I'll start the Emerald product line and, we'll just try again for the retail license and just grow, build a brand. So.
Kim, what advice or what warning might you give to those who are thinking about getting into the business? What is the most important thing you think a new business person in cannabis needs to learn or understand before they get into it, besides 280E?
Sure. I come from a long startup background, over 25 years, mostly in tech and now in cannabis and wellness. And the advice I would give anybody getting into this business is to really do your due diligence and come in with your eyes wide open. I've given a lot of talks recently on, ways to get into the cannabis industry, for example. And, newcomers will be in the room, and when we get into Q&A, I am stunned at the naivete about the complexity of the industry. Right. So really, you really need to do your due diligence on the complexity of the industry. So 280E is a big one, obviously, because it just wipes so much cash out of companies, and makes them very difficult to sustain. But there are many others. I tell people all the time, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I've done very complex startups in complex industries. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. And there's no one thing. It's that everything is hard. Everything is hard. Getting business insurance is hard, right? Having a basic business banking account is hard. Getting employee benefits, is hard. There are so many things in this industry that are, they're table stakes, right? In other businesses. Well, they're not table stakes in cannabis because they cost 10 times as much as they do, literally, than if we were starting some other kind of business. So really do your diligence, know your numbers, and understand how hard this industry really is. And it's wonderful, equally wonderful. This is the most fun I've ever had, right?
Christina, it's a fun industry to be in, isn't it?
Look, it's got its highs and its lows. I mean, the highs are great and the lows are hard. So, you're in it long enough. No, but it's a lot of fun. This is the best industry to be in. I'd say this and then journalism, right, Jimmy?
Oh, God, no. Although I have some friends who might beg to differ that are still in that industry right now. Nothing is easy. And I don't want to make this into a media conversation at all, but we could certainly talk about the fact that industry too is changing. That it used to be you had appointments to view programs. Now, because everything is on demand, the consumer is in charge of not only when they watch, what they watch, and how they watch, they get to actually create it too. And in a lot of ways, I believe, and I've had these discussions before openly, that You know, in a lot of ways, that's dangerous in many ways, because you can't stop people now from yelling fire in a crowded theater. And that's why the FCC existed. That's why commercial radio and television stations still have to go for licensure for their own broadcasting that they have to do over the air. People forget that there actually is free information being transmitted over the air. Ask any young person under the age of 21 if they have a transistor radio or a battery operated radio in their house. They don't even know what it is. They don't even know what it is. And what happened in North Carolina? People are taking out the electric grids. So now, you know, again, we have to get a little bit more savvy to that fact that we are opting into Wi-Fi. The consumer is in charge of what is out there now. And it's one of the reasons why I started this particular network, so that people in this industry could have a place to go and actually talk openly about the challenges of being in the industry. And, you know, we're right in the middle of it, Christina, aren't we?
We are. But you know what? We got a good seat. So
absolutely. Mike Emmerich, I'll make a quick sports analogy here. Used to tell me why he got into sportscasting. He was an all-time great hockey announcer for NBC for many years, really respected by everyone in the industry. He said one of the best parts of being a broadcaster or a sportscaster as well, they give you a free ticket and a pretty good seat, you know, and then you get to talk about the game, which is, you know, for anyone who's a sports fan, loves to do. Similar to the people that are in the cannabis space. Everyone in this space is passionate about the product and what they're in. And Kim, Lord knows I have a lot of respect for those that have put in their life savings and their ability to build businesses and expand them and do the due diligence necessary so they know what they're doing. You know, you talked about that naivete. You know, I'm one of the most naive people out there, right, Christina? It's okay. I'm just making fun. Kim, first of all, where Azuka is in how many states? Where are you distributed?
You know, we have license agreements covering about 20 states, Canada, Puerto Rico now. The product's not yet on the shelf in all 20. I think that's on the shelf in about 15 states.
Okay.
And growing pretty quickly. So.
And you're in New Mexico, you said, right?
I am in New Mexico. So our company, most of our team is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're founded in New York City. Our founder, chef, creator, Ron Silver, is a chef in New York City. So we've always had, and I've lived in Albuquerque for 30 years. So we've always had like 1 foot in New Mexico and 1 foot in New York. And those are two really interesting markets to be in the middle of right now, because they both legalized adult use within 24 hours of each other. And, you know, New Mexico, we've had product on the shelf since the beginning of the year, and the industry is doing great. And I tease my New York colleagues to like catch up with little old New Mexico, because they're still kind of.
Well, you know, okay, now I'm going to defend people in New York, which never happens, by the way. Guy from Boston defending New York, not going to happen. But it is a little bit smaller state, New Mexico, than New York, right? So there is that, right?
There's that. And Massachusetts was our first THC market. Too.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing it. I've been a medical patient now since 2013. So, you know, I've been in plenty of dispensaries, and I have seen the Azuka products in a lot of them. So, you know, again, who's ever doing your branding and marketing, they're doing a heck of a job. Keep it up. And everybody says it's a great product. Do you want to throw in any plugs? How do people find you? I'm guessing the internet is where you can find Azuka Time, right?
AzukaTime.com is our website. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm the only Kim Sanchez-Rael on the planet, so easy to find on LinkedIn. You can also find Azuka on LinkedIn, on the social platforms. But yeah, AzukaTime.com.
Any problems with social media platforms?
Well, you know, frustrations. We'd like to be able to do some paid promotions, but you know, we all have the same brain damage on that.
Right.
I will say hats off to LinkedIn for being a friendly town square for the industry. And I do find the community on LinkedIn to be informative, you know, typically very professional. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Let's not forget about LeafWire too, because they started as the LinkedIn of weed. And Peter's a good friend of the program as well. And I consider them friends in the industry too. And that's another great place to meet people. And you're not going to get inundated with sales calls on LeafWire. I can tell you that, as opposed to LinkedIn, which I think we've all experienced that now, right?
100%. I agree 100%.
There you go. All right. Hey, Christina, you've been great. Thank you so much for hanging in with us the whole time, and appreciate it. And it's also nice to be back into your apartment again too.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, I've moved around a few times the show, but my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Jimmy. Pro Cannabis Media is a longtime favorite of Emerald's, and so I look forward to watching more and more as it comes.
There you go. And emeraldmagazine.com. Yes.
TheEmeraldMagazine.com. Find us on Instagram at The Emerald Magazine.
All right. Well, that's fantastic. Well, I want to thank Christina DiGiovanni. I also want to thank Kim Sanchez Real from Azuka, as well as Monica Werkheiser, Shanae Bullock, and Tanya Osborne. And of course, one of our old friends, and I don't mean that have anything to do with her age, has to do with the fact that I've known her now for about as long as I've known Christina. And I think we actually met at the exact same show in 2019 in Boston. So for all of my guests, thank you so much for taking the time out on a Friday afternoon. I know how difficult it is to add this into your calendar at the end of the week. So I appreciate that. And I also appreciate all the people at Pro Cannabis Media, both of them, Dan French and Isabel Turner, because we somehow or other turn this around every single Friday afternoon. And next Friday afternoon will be our holiday show. So please tune into that, like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, coming up right after this program live is our weekly Weed Talk News show. And there were so many huge stories in cannabis this week. We start with Brittany Griner, and we welcome her back to the United States of America. So with that, remember, everybody, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, a lopsided prisoner exchange between the U.S. and Russia. Basketball star Brittany Griner is freed for an international arms dealer. Plus, no more cashless ATMs as hundreds of dispensaries scramble to create a cash-only transaction system again. And another cannabis giant company, Weedmaps, lays off 250 employees as the weed industry continues to struggle with a market correction. That's why Dutchie reorganized its management. All that and more on Cannabis News from Coast to Coast on We Talk News with Elena Pinto next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto. Big breaking news from the White House this week as the Biden administration participates in a prisoner swap with Russia to free WNBA star Brittany Griner. She had been behind bars in Russia since February and moved to a penal colony, all for having a cannabis vape oil cartridge in her luggage at a Moscow airport. It's taken months of advocating, but now Griner is officially on her way home to the U.S., much to the delight of her family.
So over the last 9 months, you all have been so privy to one of the darkest moments of my life. And so today I'm just standing here overwhelmed with emotions, but the most important emotion that I have right now is just sincere gratitude for President Biden and his entire administration. He just mentioned this work is not easy, and it has not been. There's been so many hands involved.
Of course, the White House had to participate in some political wheeling and dealing to bring Brittany Griner home. Vote Pro Podcast's Phil Adams has more details on the prisoner swap and other stories from the nation's capital this week.
Hi, this is Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, here with the Weed Talk News DC report. Brittany Griner has been freed by Russia after nearly 10 months of detention. The dramatic announcement was made by President Biden today after a high-level prisoner exchange was agreed to between the two countries. The WNBA star and two-time Olympic gold medalist had been detained and imprisoned on drug possession charges. The deal sent notorious Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout back to Russia in exchange for Greiner, who had been transferred to a penal colony to begin a 9-year sentence. The swap did not include former United States Marine Paul Whelan, though the Biden administration had been working to secure his release as well. Whelan has been held by the Russians since 2018 on espionage charges and is serving a 16-year sentence. Greiner boarded a plane on Thursday to arrive back in the United States within 24 hours. Congress has declined once again to include cannabis banking reform language in the National Defense Authorization Act. This comes as a disappointment to pro-reform lawmakers and advocates who had been looking to the large-scale defense bill as a vehicle for enacting provisions to protect financial institutions who serve the legal cannabis industry. Meanwhile, details of the so-called Safe Plus package are being negotiated by lawmakers and are emerging. That legislation could still advance through by the end of the year, either as part of an omnibus appropriations bill or as standalone legislation. DC lawmakers have approved legislation that would fundamentally change the medical cannabis program for residents of the nation's capital. In particular, the Medical Cannabis Amendment Act would eliminate existing caps on cannabis business licensing, provide tax relief to operators, and create new categories of regulated cannabis businesses. It would also codify adult self-certification as medical marijuana patients. The D.C. City Council approved the legislation by a 7-4 vote. That's the Weed Talk News D.C. report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
The longer Congress drags its feet on passing safe banking legislation, the more issues it seems to create. On the heels of lawmakers slashing the safe language from that national defense spending bill, cannabis stocks plummeted drastically on Wall Street, not boding much confidence for the financial future on the industry. And it's even impacting consumers now. Listen up, because you may need to keep cold, hard cash handy on your next trip to the dispensary. Because cannabis is still federally illegal, financial institutions are largely not allowed to work with cannabis companies, even if they're legal by state law. So you may have noticed if you ever use your debit card at the dispensary, the bud tender will round your total up to the nearest whole number and give you back change in cash. Well, that's because your purchase is actually being recorded as an ATM transaction through a point of banking system. But it seems the operators of these systems are starting to crack down. Well, this week, processors like NCR Corp's Columbus Data Services started shutting down banking systems associated with cannabis retail shops, forcing them into a cash-only operation. And we're already seeing the impact take hold in some states, like Massachusetts. Companies like Pure Oasis in Dorchester have posted on social media informing their customers they will need cash when they come in. And Air, a multi-state operator, also sent notice to its regular customers, letting them know payment for product can only be made via cash or a specific app until further notice. California, Illinois, and Massachusetts are just some of the states we've seen impacted so far. So be sure to hit the bank before your next trip to the dispensary. For now, let's get more news from Massachusetts this week. Here's Weed Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain with the Bay State Report.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tori Chamberlain, and here's what's happening in the Bay State this week. In a massive move by the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources to remove a ban on pesticides, licensed cannabis cultivators in the state will now be allowed to use certain pesticides on their crops. Now, this sounds alarming at first, but it's a wide range of mostly natural chemicals that are federally approved for use on hemp and tobacco. So they've already been used in this sort of cultivation space. They include bacteria that kill leaf-eating worms, fertilizers, and other fungicides that are pretty commonly used in cultivation. So there's no need to panic just yet. Now, this next story didn't happen in Massachusetts, but the company it involves does call the Bay State home. The U.S. National Labor Board ruled this week that Massachusetts-based Curaleaf violated labor law in Illinois, where it also operates, by refusing to bargain with unionized workers at a Chicago location there. Law states that a company must recognize and bargain with workers within 21 days of receiving a notice from their union, which Curaleaf apparently failed to do. And more news for the MSO that is good or not so good, depending on who you are. Curaleaf announced this week it's partnering with Ganjier. That's a grassroots council organization group that has a pretty strong reputation in cannabis for being the premier sommelier certification program of the industry. But there seems to be some mixed reaction out there, certainly that I've seen online. Curaleaf has touted the venture as a first of its kind cannabis education partnership, but those who consider themselves part of the legacy industry don't seem to be totally on board. I spoke with Maggie Wilson, CMO of Fruit Slabs and a certified sommelier herself, about what she thinks about this partnership.
I read the press release, and one of the things that it said was like they want to do this in such a quick way so that they have tons of people who are certified as Ganjiers, blah, 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 through Curaleaf. And it's like, do you want to do it right or do you want to do it fast? Because it doesn't, like, it's not a 4-hour training certification to learn about this plant. Like, you wouldn't take a 4-hour training course and be like, I'm a lavender sommelier. I know everything about lavender. You would not. You would absolutely not. You would be like, I studied for years and learned about how this plant grows, where this plant grows, why this plant grows like this, what uses it has. And you really become like, you're not a botanist, but you literally are thinking about the plant, like as the plant.
So whether you're a fan of the partnership or not, this is certainly going to be a big move that's going to impact the industry in some kind of way. That's it for the Bay State Report this week. I'm Tori Chamberlain.
So while some companies are being pushed to go cash only, others are making cuts to their staff. And even more so, a pair of businesses are now facing allegations of falsely advertising the THC levels on their products. Deborah Borchardt has all the details in this week's Green Market Report.
I'm Deborah Borchardt, and this is the business update for Weed Talk News from the Green Market Report. This week, 2 companies were accused of inflating THC levels for premium priced products, both Steezy and VO Leasing, which makes the presidential cannabis products, were the subjects of lawsuits filed in California. Both sell products that claim to have high THC levels, but when tested were beyond the margin of error established by the state. Some were as off as much as 30%, so they are being accused of false advertising. Weed Maps said this week it was laying off 25% of its staff, or 175 people. The move is intended to cut expenses, but it will cost over $10 million in severance costs. Now, this comes shortly after longtime CEO Chris Beals departed the company and amid continuing losses at Weed Maps. And finally, a lawsuit was filed against the Facebook parent company, Meta, in connection with the cannabis Ponzi scheme, Juicy Fields. Marketing for investors of the scheme was done through social media. That is why they're going after Meta. The case involves 800 people from 50 different countries, and €2 billion is missing from these investor accounts. And those are your top headlines this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
Overseas, another government seems to be eager to go green. Last week, we told you about the efforts in Ireland to introduce a bill legalizing cannabis for personal use. And it seems lawmakers there are already making progress. Lex Pelger has the details from across the pond.
I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. An Irish lawmaker introduced a bill to legalize cannabis possession. If passed, the bill would legalize the possession of up to 7 grams of cannabis and 2.5 grams of cannabis resin for personal use. The amendment does not reference the cultivation or sale of cannabis and focuses on removing criminal charges for personal use of the plant. The lawmaker introduced the bill, Gino Kenny of the People Before Profits Party, said, "I believe the existing legislation is out of date and out of time. We need a different narrative around drug reform. Different parts of the world are looking at different models which do not criminalize people and which take a harm reduction approach." Ireland has one of the highest rates of cannabis use in Europe, but one of the most restrictive medical cannabis programs. This legislation is a welcome opening of their current laws. In Lithuania, the Parliament's Committee on Legal Affairs advanced cannabis decriminalization legislation. The proposed law would remove criminal penalties for personal amount use, but would include citations with fines ranging from 30 euros to 250 euros. Even though Lithuania joined the EU in 2004, for many years it was the only country in the Union to criminalize even the cultivation of hemp. But by 2018, not only was hemp allowed to be grown, the Parliament also voted to allow the medical use of cannabis for a small set of serious medical conditions. That being said, no patient has ever received approval for medical cannabis use. This decriminalization bill is another step in the right direction. Finally, in European hemp news, EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, has received applications from the European Industrial Hemp Association for two forms of CBD, CBD isolate and synthetic CBD. The industry group proposes a limit of 17.5 milligrams of CBD per day to be a safe level. A number of other hemp advocacy groups around the world have been questioning that low number, but the industry group said that based on the available literature and their own research, which has yet to be publicly released, that this is the correct number. The status of CBD in the EU is still in limbo, and one of the big questions will be, can CBD be added to food products? And if so, how much can people safely consume per day? That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations, reporting for Weed Talk News.
Back in the U.S., there's increasing support to update and change some medical marijuana laws, particularly in Michigan. Executive Director of the state's NORML organization, Rick Thompson, has the details.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Well, there's a new survey out from NORML of Michigan, and it shows there is no serious interest among Michigan voters to rescind or retract any of the rights and privileges held by medical cannabis patients and caregivers. In a survey conducted from November 30th through December 6th, the Epic MRA polling company spoke to 600 likely voters and contacted 65% of them through mobile phones. Of those respondents, 66% said they favored keeping the medical laws the way they currently are or expanding the rights for sick people to use cannabis. Only 21% of respondents said they favored enacting restrictions on cannabis patients. Those demographics with the greatest support for adding new rights include liberals, Democrats, those people identifying as Black, people aged 18 to 49, and those people claiming no religious affiliation. Now, the folks who believe medical patients' rights should be rolled back include those sympathetic to the pro-life movement and Republican women. Although there was no significant variance among respondents based on gender, the areas of the state with the fewest cannabis businesses, meaning the central and western portions, expressed the most disfavor with current medical laws, while the Bay region and Southeast Michigan showed the most support for cannabis patients. This latest survey continues NORML of Michigan's long history of asking poll questions in order to influence public policy and show true support for cannabis law reform, and was most significantly employed in the run-up to the 2016 and 2018 efforts at legalizing cannabis for adult use. This poll comes at a time when conservatives and Republicans in the state have just failed to pass legislation amending the medical marijuana law to cut caregivers' plant count by 80% and restrict patients in their choice of a person to grow plants on their behalf. The poll's initiators hope that this result will discourage any group from attempting to damage Michigan's 14-year-old medical marijuana law. And full disclosure, I am the executive director of the Michigan chapter of NORML. Interim director of Michigan's Cannabis Regulatory Agency, Brian Hanna, was named full director of the agency by Governor Whitmer early last week. Hanna now leads a department of over 200 employees, a task at which he seemingly has no experience. Hannah's background in law enforcement and in the military may make him an attractive choice for ramping up enforcement actions, but in the short time he's been on the job, Director Hannah hasn't shown empathy for consumers and has used a heavy hand to smack down an industry that just needs a little shaking. His zeal for surprise inspections and very public shaming of cannabis companies who fall outside the lines may put him in a large legal entanglement, as his predecessor, Andrew Brisboe, did when he issued a huge recall of cannabis products in 2021. Director Hannah has a tumultuous industry to wrangle, and his seeming dismissal of cannabis consumer issues does not bode well for his popularity or effectiveness as a leader of the CRA. As always, we'll keep you updated on the status of Michigan's legal market each and every week. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
We all know the road to legalization is a long one. Once legislation is passed and made law, there are still several hurdles to overcome and fine-tuning to do for the industry. And for the state of Illinois, the hurdle to get legal home delivery may soon be cleared. So let's check in with Thomas Howard for more.
Hi, it's Tom from Cannabis Legalization News. You can find me at CannabisIndustryLawyer.com, and I'm here with the Illinois update for the week that was December 8th. Yesterday, J.B. Pritzker hinted at maybe allowing delivery licenses in the state of Illinois as he was touring, and made comments at one of the first social equity dispensaries that is opened in Chicagoland. That is in Bucktown specifically. That is the Ivy Hall. That's the name of the dispensary. Ivy Hall, its founder, co-owner, Nigel Dandridge, has a quote, "I am living proof of Illinois making good on its promise to carve out a more equitable cannabis landscape for generations to come." That is, once again, that is Nigel Dandridge, one of the owners of the Ivy Hall dispensary in Bucktown. Pritzker went on to say that all 192 conditional cannabis dispensary licenses have been issued, so look for a lot of new dispensary locations and a corresponding uptick in sales, as there's more locations in which for you to buy the product in the state of Illinois over the coming 2023. And Pritzker then had some more comments on it. So let's look at some of his quotes. "Much of the challenge has been the court system and the amount of time it's taken to get through the court system. People suing because they didn't get a winner in the lottery for a license." That is what Pritzker said. And then when asked about cannabis delivery licenses possibilities in the state, he said, "At first blush, without the data in front of me, I think as long as it is regulated, as long as we make sure that the person who ordered it gets it and that they're legally allowed, then to me, it would seem like it is the same as somebody coming into the store, which means that there may be another round of cannabis delivery licenses for the first time in the state of Illinois. That's something for 2023 because it is done. There have been no new changes to the cannabis laws during the veto session, the lame duck session in the Illinois legislature. They are now on break and they will reconvene in early January. And that's probably when we'll see you next, unless there's a big news out of Illinois next week. That's what we have for you. Please check out Cannabis Legalization News on YouTube. And back to you, Elena.
Software company Dutchie, based out of Oregon, has long been a leader in technology for cannabis business. But the company is now announcing a major shakeup in its own leadership. Marianne Kursagi has that story and more from Oregon.
I'm Marianne from Alibi Cannabis with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Oregon darling and cannabis tech company Dutchie underwent a major leadership shakeup last week. The board of directors has named a new CEO, new CFO, new general counsel, and a new vice president of engineering. Many of the new executives hail from Toast, a Boston-based tech company. Next, Oregon regulators issued a recall for more than 22,000 cannabis concentrate products over concerns that they might contain pesticides. The concentrates were manufactured by Bobsled and Quantum Alchemy. Selling product that has failed pesticide tests is harmful to the consumer and harmful to the industry. Time will tell what penalties there may be for these operators. And lastly, two long-running Oregon companies, East Fork Cultivars and Peak Extracts, are banding together to diversify their product offerings and strengthen their position in a stale market that's dealing with significant obstacles, including overproduction and depressed wholesale market prices. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
There's lots of talk on social equity in cannabis these days, and we've been reporting about how Washington State has been one of the latest to implement programs to address that very topic. Well, now it looks like the state could also be opening that conversation up to the Indigenous population of our country. Our own Josh Kincaid explains.
I'm Josh Kincaid with the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. A new Indigenous Cannabis Association aims to unite America's tribes around cannabis. Many of the 574 federally recognized American Indian tribes are re-recognizing the plant's medicinal healing powers. 21 of the state's 27 tribes have had a cannabis impact with the governor. Some tribes are only cultivating, while some are fully integrating dispensaries. Some tribes are just farmers. Some are just retail storefronts. Personally, I'm hoping they make some blunts. Tribes are a sovereign nation, meaning that their surrounding states' cannabis policies don't apply. So even in remote rural areas, tribal-owned smoke shops can do quite well selling to tribal members and outsiders alike, and having to comply only with compacts made with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and state authorities. Then there's a social good, such as revenues. In Washington State, the Puyallup tribe is putting together revenues into clinical cannabis medical research and partnering with academic institutions, as well as building housing for the tribe's homeless and addressing their social opioid crisis. Next week, you guys are going to find out more about Washington State's cannabis scene. With that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
Not long ago, Pennsylvania's governor encouraged constituents to apply for a marijuana pardon program, and thousands of people did. But it turns out maybe the governor wasn't as ready to be as generous as once perceived. But there is at least some generosity happening in the Keystone State. Here's Claudia Post.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. When announcing the Marijuana Pardon Project earlier this year, our governor, Tom Wolf, said it had the potential to help thousands of Pennsylvanians clear their records. But alas, it has fallen short. More than 3,500 applicants were sent in for the program. It was aimed at wiping out low-level marijuana convictions in a one-time mass act of clemency. Fewer than 250 people will have the opportunity to clear their record this month. A vast number of applications were denied because the cases were for people with more than one conviction. I don't know why they don't clarify things, but often cannabis consumers get multiple convictions when they're arrested the first time. After a paraphernalia charge, then they get a possession charge all at once. That's a real catch-22. You would have to essentially lead a police-free life. Other than that, one marijuana encounter to qualify. How unfair is this? Governor Wolf, do something. Air Wellness is embracing the season of giving. It announced that it would start 12 days of giving in a campaign. Every purchase at its dispensaries will cost $1.12 per transaction. That's pretty good. And they will help Freedom to Grow for minorities and help the Medical Marijuana Project Clean Slate Initiative. Overall, Air Wellness aims to reach a goal of collecting $100,000, which will go towards supporting cannabis prisoners and their families, as well as various other advocacy efforts and expungement programs. Not much going on in Pennsylvania this week. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not. For Weed Talk News, Have a fabulous week.
The Green Mountain State gets even greener. Just 2 months into adult use sales in Vermont, and more stores are getting ready to welcome customers. And cannabis regulators aren't done handing out licenses either. Here's Jessie Lynn Dolan with the Vermont Report.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. A Brandon, Vermont retailer, Pine Grove Organics, grand opening is on December 8th, with Northeast Cannabis in St. Johnsbury's grand opening on December 9th. The Cannabis Control Board approved 8 new licenses this week, including 5 cultivators, 1 wholesaler, 1 manufacturer, and 1 retailer. The board sent their draft report to legislators on solid concentrates to the board's advisory committee for feedback. The board will host a public meeting before submitting the report. The board will submit another report to the legislators in January of 2023 on regulating hemp and hemp-derived products, again after public comment. They also announced that the board's general counsel, David Scher, has been selected to serve as state director in Washington, D.C., and will no longer be on the board. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
And finally, the next time you go to Vegas, get ready to get lit in a whole new way. We've told you about the company and dispensary Planet 13 and how they're even expanding to Illinois. But first, at its home base in Vegas, Planet 13 will officially be the first of its kind consumption space in the area. When you visit, you'll be able to watch products being made, purchase products, and consume them all under the same roof. Planet 13 has always had a unique space, but adding a luxurious 420 lounge close to the strip is only going to elevate things. So what happens in Vegas may stay in Vegas, but what happens with weed continues to evolve. In fact, it is a whole new world of weed out there, so use it wisely. And that's it for Weed Talk News this week. I'm Elena Pinto.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCM TV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
Which at first I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm an activist, but I have, held a bullhorn on the State House steps. I have frequently testified before the Cannabis Control Commission and the state legislature, and I'm not, shy about criticizing where I see, mistakes being made. So yeah, I think that's what differentiates me, just an appreciation for the plant. And then also I'm a cannabis entrepreneur myself. I've started businesses, so I've lived that entrepreneurial journey. I know how hard it is. It is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint. So I think that, I'm in the game, not just on the sidelines.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.